Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're exhausted, but somehow still scrolling through YouTube. And suddenly you stumble across a Family Guy compilation that's supposed to help you sleep. Sounds weird, right? Well, you're not alone. Millions of people have discovered that this chaotic animated sitcom has become the ultimate sleep aid. And today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of Family Guy sleep culture and uncovering some mind-blowing facts that'll change how you think about this phenomenon forever. Before we get started, let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself drifting off to the sounds of Peter Griffin's ridiculous antics? If so, you're part of a massive community that's turned what was meant to be comedy gold into the perfect bedtime soundtrack. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this works so well and discover some incredible secrets about the show that even die-hard fans don't know. Let's start with the most surprising fact of all. Family Guy wasn't designed to be relaxing, yet it's become one of the most popular sleep aids on the internet. The reason behind this paradox is actually rooted in psychology. Our brains crave familiar patterns when we're trying to wind down. And after more than 2 decades on air, Family Guy has created a predictable rhythm that viewers find comforting. The show's structure follows a specific formula that makes it perfect for background noise. Each episode contains multiple short segments, cutaway gags that last just long enough to capture attention without requiring deep focus, and character voices that remain consistent throughout. This creates what sleep experts call a cognitive lullaby, where your brain can partially engage without becoming overstimulated. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has actually acknowledged this unexpected use of his creation. In interviews, he's mentioned receiving countless messages from fans who use Family Guy episodes to fall asleep. What's fascinating is that this wasn't intentional, but it happened because of specific audio design choices made during production. The audio mixing in Family Guy is deliberately compressed, meaning the difference between the loudest and quietest sounds is minimized. This prevents jarring volume spikes that might wake you up. Unlike many other TV shows where dramatic music or sound effects can suddenly blast through your speakers, the voice acting also maintains a relatively steady pitch and tone, creating a consistent audio environment that's conducive to relaxation. Now let's talk about the science behind why repetitive content helps us sleep. When we watch the same episodes repeatedly, our brains start to predict what's coming next. This predictability reduces anxiety and mental stimulation, allowing our minds to gradually wind down. Family Guy episodes are structured in a way that supports this process, with familiar character, dynamics, and recurring gags that create a sense of security. The phenomenon has grown so large that entire YouTube channels are dedicated to Family Guy sleep compilations. These videos regularly rack up millions of views, with comment sections filled with people sharing their gratitude for finding the perfect sleep content. Some compilations run for 10, 12, even 15 hours, specifically designed to play throughout the entire night without interruption. What makes this even more remarkable is the demographic involved. While Family Guy's primary audience skews toward adults aged 18 to 49, the sleep community spans all age groups. Parents report using these compilations to help their children fall asleep, while elderly viewers have discovered that familiar voices and simple storylines provide comfort during restless nights. The cultural impact of this trend extends beyond just sleep habits. It's created a shared experience among viewers who might never meet but who all understand the comfort of falling asleep to Peter Griffin's voice. Social media groups dedicated to Family Guy sleep content have thousands of members who share their favorite episodes, discuss which seasons work best for sleeping, and even create custom playlists for different moods. But let's dive deeper into what makes Family Guy specifically effective compared to other animated shows. The key lies in its character consistency and emotional tone. Unlike shows with dramatic story arcs or intense emotional moments, Family Guy maintains a relatively flat emotional landscape. Even when conflicts arise, they're typically resolved quickly and without lasting consequences, preventing the kind of narrative tension that might keep your mind active. The show's humor style also plays a crucial role. The comedy is largely observational and referential, rather than building toward major punchlines that require your full attention. This allows viewers to drift in and out of consciousness without feeling like they're missing important plot points or set up payoff sequences that other comedies rely on. Character voice consistency is another crucial factor. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, creating a unified vocal landscape. His voice acting style maintains consistent energy levels and delivery patterns across different characters, contributing to the overall audio stability that makes the show suitable for sleep. The animation style itself supports the sleep-friendly nature of the content. Family Guy uses bright, primary colors and simple character designs that don't create visual complexity or overstimulation. The backgrounds are typically static, and camera movements are minimal compared to more action-oriented animated series. This visual simplicity prevents the kind of dynamic imagery that might keep viewers visually engaged when they're trying to relax. Research into sleep and media consumption has revealed some fascinating insights about why certain content works better than others for bedtime viewing. Studies show that familiar content reduces cortisol levels, the stress hormone that keeps us alert and awake. When we watch something we've seen before, our brains don't need to work as hard to process new information, allowing other systems to begin the shutdown process necessary for sleep. The episodic nature of Family Guy also supports healthy sleep habits. Unlike serialized dramas that create cliffhangers and emotional investment in ongoing storylines, Family Guy episodes are largely self-contained. This means viewers don't feel compelled to stay awake to find out what happens next, reducing the kind of narrative anxiety that can interfere with sleep onset. Temperature regulation during sleep is crucial, and surprisingly, the content we consume before bed can affect our body's ability to cool down. Family Guy's predictable pacing and familiar content help maintain steady heart rate and breathing patterns, supporting the natural temperature drop that signals our bodies it's time to sleep. The show's approach to conflict resolution also contributes to its sleep-friendly qualities. Most episodes follow a pattern where problems are introduced and resolved within 22 minutes, creating a sense of completion and closure that helps viewers feel satisfied and ready to rest. This is dramatically different from shows that end episodes with unresolved tension or dramatic cliffhangers. Cultural references and pop culture jokes in Family Guy serve an interesting function for sleep viewers. Because many of these references are repeated across multiple episodes and seasons, they create layers of familiarity that deepen over time. Longtime viewers develop an almost subliminal recognition of these patterns, further enhancing the comfort and predictability that supports sleep. The timing of cutaway gags is another element that works in favor of sleep viewers. These brief tangential scenes typically last between 10 to 30 seconds, providing just enough variety to prevent complete monotony while maintaining the overall flow of familiar content. They're short enough that viewers who drift off won't miss significant plot development, but engaging enough to provide gentle mental stimulation for those still partially awake. Voice acting quality and consistency across the series is remarkable when you consider that Family Guy has been in production for over 20 years. The main voice actors have maintained their character voices with impressive consistency, creating an audio signature that remains recognizable and comforting across different seasons and episodes. This vocal stability is crucial for sleep content, as changes in voice quality or delivery style could be jarring enough to wake viewers. The show's musical approach also supports its effectiveness as sleep content. The background music is typically understated and doesn't compete with dialogue for attention. Musical cues are predictable and rarely feature sudden volume changes or jarring instrumental choices that might disrupt the relaxation process. Even the show's musical numbers, while entertaining, follow familiar structures that don't create unexpected audio experiences. Character development in Family Guy follows patterns that support its use as sleep content. Unlike shows where characters undergo significant growth or change, Family Guy characters remain relatively static in their personalities and behaviors. This consistency means viewers always know what to expect from each character, reducing the cognitive load required to follow character arcs or relationship developments. The pacing of dialogue delivery is another crucial element. Family Guy conversations typically maintain steady rhythms without the rapid-fire exchanges or dramatic pauses that characterize other comedy series. This consistent pacing helps maintain the audio environment that many viewers find conducive to sleep, providing gentle stimulation without sudden changes that might increase alertness. Production quality across different seasons has remained remarkably consistent, which is important for viewers who cycle through multiple episodes during sleep sessions. While animation techniques have evolved over the years, the core audio elements that make Family Guy effective for sleep have remained stable throughout the series' run. The global appeal of Family Guy as sleep content transcends cultural boundaries. International viewers report similar experiences with the show's sleep-inducing properties, even when watching dubbed versions in their native languages. This suggests that the fundamental structural elements that make the show effective for sleep are independent of specific cultural references or language-based humor. Streaming platform algorithms have recognized this usage pattern and now actively recommend Family Guy content to viewers who consume other sleep-related media. This has created a feedback loop where the show's sleep community continues to grow as more people discover its effectiveness through algorithmic suggestions. The economic impact of this trend is substantial. Streaming services have reported that Family Guy episodes generate billions of hours of viewing time, with a significant portion of that consumption happening during typical sleep hours. This has influenced licensing decisions and content acquisition strategies across multiple platforms. Medical professionals have begun studying the Family Guy sleep phenomenon as part of broader research into media-assisted sleep techniques. While not officially prescribed as a sleep aid, some sleep specialists acknowledge that for certain individuals, familiar comedic content can be part of a healthy bedtime routine when used appropriately. The community aspect of Family Guy sleep culture has created unique social connections. Online forums feature discussions about optimal episode selections, volume levels, and viewing setups specifically designed for sleep use. These communities provide support and advice for people struggling with insomnia or other sleep difficulties. Production decisions made decades ago continue to influence the show's effectiveness as sleep content today. Early episodes featured simpler audio mixing and more straightforward storylines that many sleep viewers prefer. This has led to interesting discussions about which seasons and episodes work best for different types of sleep needs. The psychological comfort provided by Family Guy's dysfunctional but ultimately loving family dynamic resonates with viewers seeking emotional stability before sleep. Despite the characters' many flaws and conflicts, the show consistently reinforces themes of family loyalty and unconditional acceptance that can provide emotional security during vulnerable sleep periods. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's unexpected role as the internet's favorite sleep aid, it's clear that this phenomenon represents something much larger than just a quirky viewing habit. It demonstrates how content creators can accidentally tap into deep psychological needs, how communities form around shared experiences, and how familiar media can provide comfort in our increasingly chaotic world. Whether you're a longtime member of the Family Guy sleep community or someone who's never considered using animated sitcoms as a relaxation tool, this trend offers fascinating insights into human psychology, media consumption, and the unexpected ways we find peace in our daily lives. The next time you're struggling to fall asleep, you might want to give those Family Guy compilations a try. You'll be joining millions of viewers who have discovered that sometimes the best lullaby comes from the most unexpected source, and you might just find yourself sleeping better than you have in years.
Have you ever wondered what secrets lurk behind one of television's most controversial animated series? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes shocking world of Family Guy, with facts so fascinating they might just help you drift off to sleep. But trust me, you'll want to stay awake for these incredible revelations about Seth MacFarlane's groundbreaking creation. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator named Seth MacFarlane is sitting in his tiny apartment, sketching out what would become one of the most polarizing shows in television history. Little did he know that his crude drawings of a dysfunctional Rhode Island family would spawn over 2 decades of entertainment, controversy, and cultural impact that continues to this day. Family Guy didn't just stumble into existence by accident. The show's origin story is actually rooted in McFarlane's college thesis project at the Rhode Island School of Design. Back in 1995, he created a short film called The Life of Larry, featuring a middle-aged man named Larry and his talking dog. This 9-minute animated short caught the attention of television executives and eventually evolved into the Family Guy we know today. What's remarkable is that many of the core elements from that original student film made it directly into the series, proving that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. The casting process for Family Guy reveals some truly surprising facts that most fans never discover. Seth MacFarlane himself voices not just one, but 4 major characters in the show. He's the voice behind Peter Griffin, Brian the dog, Stewie Griffin, and Glenn Quagmire. What's even more impressive is that MacFarlane can seamlessly switch between these vastly different vocal personalities during recording sessions, often having entire conversations with himself as different characters. The other voice actors frequently joke that they feel like they're working with a one-man show, since MacFarlane essentially carries the comedic weight of multiple personalities. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, actually wasn't the original choice for the character. The role was initially offered to Lacey Chabert, who you might recognize from Mean Girls and Party of Five. Chabert did voice Meg Griffin in the early seasons, but scheduling conflicts led to her departure, and Mila Kunis stepped in to take over. Meanwhile, Borstein had been working as a writer and consultant on the show before landing the role of Lois, making her transition to voice acting feel completely natural. The show's animation style might look simple, but there's incredible complexity hidden beneath those seemingly basic character designs. Each episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial script to final broadcast. The animation process involves hundreds of artists, animators, and technicians working across multiple studios. What's particularly fascinating is that the show uses a hybrid approach, combining traditional hand-drawn animation with computer-generated elements. Those elaborate fight scenes and musical numbers that fans love so much often require specialized animation techniques that push the boundaries of television production budgets. Speaking of production, Family Guy has one of the most unusual writing rooms in television. The writer's room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional television writing environment. Writers are encouraged to pitch their wildest, most outrageous ideas without any filters. Many of the show's most memorable cutaway gags actually come from spontaneous brainstorming sessions where writers try to one-up each other with increasingly absurd scenarios. The famous "Bird is the Word" episode, for example, originated from a writer casually mentioning the old Trashmen song, which then spiraled into an entire episode concept within hours. The show's relationship with censorship and network standards has created some legendary behind-the-scenes stories. During its early years on Fox, Family Guy constantly pushed against network restrictions, leading to numerous battles over content. Some episodes were heavily edited or had entire segments removed before airing. Interestingly, when the show moved to Adult Swim and later back to Fox with renewed popularity, many of these previously censored segments were restored in DVD releases and streaming versions, giving fans access to the creator's original, uncensored vision. Family Guy's cancellation and resurrection story reads like something out of a Hollywood fairy tale. After 3 seasons, Fox canceled the show in 2002 due to declining ratings. However, something unprecedented happened. DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns created a massive surge in popularity. Fans organized campaigns, online petitions gained hundreds of thousands of signatures, and merchandise sales skyrocketed. This grassroots movement convinced Fox to revive the series in 2005, making Family Guy one of the first shows in television history to be brought back to life primarily due to fan demand and home video success. The show's cultural impact extends far beyond television screens. Family Guy has influenced internet culture in ways that most people don't realize. Many popular memes and viral video formats can trace their origins back to Family Guy episodes. The show's cutaway gag structure has become a template for online content creators, and phrases like "freakin' sweet" and "giggity giggity" have entered everyday vocabulary. Social media platforms are filled with Family Guy reaction GIFs and quotes, demonstrating the show's lasting influence on digital communication. Seth MacFarlane's musical background plays a crucial role in Family Guy's identity that often goes unnoticed. MacFarlane is an accomplished jazz singer and pianist who has released several albums and performed with major orchestras. This musical talent directly influences the show's frequent musical numbers and elaborate song and dance sequences. When characters break into song, MacFarlane often personally composes the music and provides vocal arrangements. Some of the show's most memorable moments, like Stewie and Brian's road trip songs or Peter's various musical adventures, showcase MacFarlane's genuine musical abilities rather than just comedy writing. The voice recording process for Family Guy involves some truly unique techniques that create the show's distinctive sound. Unlike many animated series where actors record their lines separately, Family Guy often brings the core cast together for group recording sessions. This allows for more natural interactions and improvised moments between characters. Seth Green, who voices Chris Griffin, frequently ad-libs during these sessions, leading to some of the characters' most endearing moments. The chemistry between voice actors during these collaborative recording sessions contributes significantly to the family dynamic that makes the show feel authentic despite its outrageous scenarios. Family Guy's international variations reveal fascinating cultural adaptations that most American viewers never see. Different countries have created their own localized versions of certain episodes, replacing American pop culture references with local celebrities and cultural touchstones. The show airs in over 50 countries, and each region has unique censorship requirements that lead to different editing approaches. Some countries focus heavily on removing violence while allowing sexual content, while others take the opposite approach. These international versions sometimes create entirely different comedic rhythms and viewing experiences. The show's relationship with guest stars has produced some incredible behind-the-scenes stories. Many celebrities who appear on Family Guy are longtime fans who specifically request to be part of episodes. Conway Twitty, whose music videos frequently interrupt episodes as random cutaway gags, became a running joke specifically because MacFarlane and the writers found his earnest country music performances hilariously incongruous with the show's irreverent tone. Some guest stars have recorded multiple episodes worth of material during single recording sessions, allowing the show to feature their characters across multiple seasons. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has created a unique position in television comedy. The show operates under what writers call the equal opportunity offense philosophy, meaning that no topic, group, or individual is considered off-limits for comedic treatment. This approach has generated both criticism and praise from various quarters, but it has also allowed the show to address social issues in ways that more conventional programming cannot. Episodes dealing with topics like religion, politics, and social justice often use humor as a vehicle for presenting multiple perspectives on complex issues. The technical aspects of Family Guy's production reveal impressive attention to detail that viewers might not notice. The show's color palette has evolved significantly over its run, with newer episodes featuring more sophisticated lighting and shading techniques. Background artists create incredibly detailed environments that often include visual jokes and Easter eggs that reward careful viewers. The Drunken Clam, the Griffin House, and other recurring locations contain hundreds of small details that remain consistent across episodes, creating a lived-in feel that supports the show's fictional world. Family Guy's impact on other animated series cannot be overstated. The show's success paved the way for adult-oriented animated comedies like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, and Rick and Morty. Its influence on writing style, particularly the use of non-sequitur cutaway gags and pop culture references, has become a standard template for animated comedy. Many current animated series creators cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their own work, demonstrating its lasting impact on the medium. The show's merchandise empire extends into surprisingly diverse areas. Beyond typical television show merchandise like t-shirts and toys, Family Guy has inspired everything from mobile apps to theme park attractions. The show's characters appear on products ranging from breakfast cereals to automobile accessories. This merchandising success has contributed significantly to the show's financial viability and cultural presence, making Family Guy characters recognizable, even to people who don't regularly watch the series. Family Guy's writing team includes some of television's most talented comedy writers, many of whom have gone on to create their own successful series. The show serves as a training ground for comedy writers, providing them with experience in rapid-fire joke writing, character development, and serialized storytelling. Alumni of the Family Guy writing staff have contributed to shows like The Simpsons, South Park, and Saturday Night Live, spreading the show's comedic influence throughout the industry. The show's approach to character development over multiple seasons reveals sophisticated long-term storytelling strategies. While Family Guy is known for its episodic nature and reset-button storytelling, careful viewers can trace character evolution across seasons. Stewie's gradual shift from world domination fantasies to more nuanced character interactions, Brian's ongoing struggles with alcoholism and romantic relationships, and Peter's various career changes all represent subtle character development that occurs alongside the show's more obvious comedic elements. Family Guy's relationship with current events and topical humor requires incredibly fast production turnarounds that most viewers don't appreciate. The show's writers and animators often work under extreme time pressure to incorporate recent news events and pop culture phenomena into episodes. This rapid response capability has allowed Family Guy to remain culturally relevant across multiple decades, but it also creates significant production challenges that require careful coordination between writing, animation, and broadcast scheduling. The show's musical parodies and elaborate musical sequences often involve complex licensing negotiations and legal considerations. When Family Guy parodies specific songs or musical styles, the production team must navigate copyright laws while creating content that's clearly transformative enough to qualify for fair use protection. Some of the show's most memorable musical moments required months of legal work behind the scenes, demonstrating the complexity involved in creating seemingly simple comedic content. Family Guy's impact on voice acting as a profession has been substantial and lasting. The show's success has elevated voice acting from a relatively niche specialty to a more mainstream entertainment career path. Seth MacFarlane's multiple voice roles have inspired other actors to develop versatile vocal capabilities, and the show's ensemble cast approach has become a model for other animated series. Voice acting workshops and training programs now regularly reference Family Guy techniques and approaches. The show's digital presence and streaming availability have introduced Family Guy to entirely new generations of viewers who experience the series differently than original broadcast audiences. Binge-watching capabilities allow viewers to notice long-term character arcs and recurring jokes that might be missed during weekly viewing. Streaming platforms have also made international versions and extended cuts available to broader audiences, creating new ways to experience familiar content. Family Guy's influence on comedy writing extends beyond animation into live-action television and film. The show's rapid-fire reference style and willingness to break the fourth wall have influenced writers across multiple mediums. Comedy Central roasts, Saturday Night Live sketches, and even stand-up comedy routines now regularly employ techniques that were pioneered or popularized by Family Guy writers. The show's approach to holiday episodes and special events demonstrates sophisticated audience engagement strategies. Family Guy's Christmas, Halloween, and other holiday episodes often feature elaborate production values and guest stars, creating appointment television that generates significant viewer loyalty. These special episodes frequently become fan favorites that get rewatched annually, contributing to the show's lasting cultural presence. As we reach the end of our journey through these fascinating Family Guy facts, it's clear that this seemingly simple animated series contains layers of complexity, creativity, and cultural influence that most viewers never fully appreciate. From Seth MacFarlane's one-man vocal circus to the show's groundbreaking approach to adult animation, Family Guy has carved out a unique space in television history that continues to evolve and surprise audiences. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone just discovering the series, these behind-the-scenes insights reveal the incredible amount of talent, dedication, and creative risk-taking that goes into every episode. The show's ability to remain relevant and controversial after more than 2 decades speaks to its creators' understanding of comedy, culture, and the ever-changing landscape of entertainment. So the next time you're settling in for a Family Guy marathon, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island. You're experiencing the result of thousands of hours of creative work by some of the most talented people in entertainment, all coming together to create something that's simultaneously ridiculous and profound, offensive and heartwarming, simple and incredibly sophisticated. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere out there, Seth MacFarlane is probably already working on the next episode that will surprise, delight, and possibly outrage audiences all over again. That's the magic of Family Guy. And that's what makes it truly special in the vast landscape of television entertainment. Picture this. You're lying in bed, phone in hand, ready to drift off to the soothing sound of random Family Guy trivia. Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because tonight we're diving deep into the most bizarre, shocking, and downright disturbing moments that have happened to every single character in Quahog. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your favorite dysfunctional cartoon family the same way again. Now, before we start this journey through animated trauma, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the worst day of your life was broadcast on national television for millions to laugh at? Well, that's basically every episode of Family Guy for these poor fictional souls. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the darkest corners of Seth MacFarlane's twisted imagination. Starting alphabetically with Adam West, because why not begin with a mayor who's nuttier than a fruitcake? This eccentric political figure finally found his soulmate when he married Carol, Lois's sister. For a guy who regularly talks to his own hand and thinks cardboard cutouts are real people, finding true love seemed like a miracle. The wedding was beautiful, the honeymoon was passionate, and for once in his bizarre life, Adam West looked genuinely happy. But happiness in Family Guy is like a snowball in hell. It melts faster than you can say cutaway gag. Carol decided that one mayor wasn't enough for her appetite, so she started having an affair with another man. When Adam discovered this betrayal, instead of walking away with his dignity intact, he challenged the other guy to a duel. Because nothing says rational response like pistols at dawn, right? The worst part wasn't just the cheating. It was watching this lonely, eccentric man desperately fight for someone who clearly didn't deserve his devotion. Carol promised it would never happen again, but we all knew that was complete garbage. Adam deserved so much better than a woman who treated his heart like a revolving door. Moving on to Angela, Peter's former boss at the toy company. Unlike most characters who simply disappear without explanation, Angela got a proper send-off that hit viewers right in the feels. When voice actress Carrie Fisher passed away in real life, the show made the touching decision to address it directly in the series. According to Peter's explanation, Angela died doing what she loved, which was apparently swimming less than 20 minutes after eating. Now, we all know that's an old wives' tale about getting cramps. But in the Family Guy universe, it was enough to send this strong, independent businesswoman to her watery grave. It's both absurd and oddly respectful, which perfectly captures the show's ability to blend humor with genuine emotion. Barbara Pewterschmidt, or Babs as she's known to friends, has endured decades of her husband Carter's wandering eye. This woman has put up with more infidelity than a reality TV show contestant, and somehow she keeps forgiving him. The breaking point came when Peter caught Carter in bed with yet another woman, and after some classic Griffin family blackmail shenanigans, the secret inevitably came out. Picture the devastation on Babs's face when she realized that everyone knew about her husband's latest affair before she did. The humiliation of being the last to know, the embarrassment of having your private pain become public gossip. It's enough to break anyone's spirit. She kicked his crusty behind out of the house and tried to start fresh, but love makes fools of us all. And she eventually took him back. The irony is that Babs isn't exactly innocent herself. She's had her own affairs over the years, including that memorable encounter with Jackie Gleason. But there's something particularly cruel about Carter's public humiliation of his wife that makes this betrayal sting more than the others. Bonnie Swanson represents the dark side of suburban marriage. When she's not cheating on her paralyzed husband, she's literally trying to murder him with ground glass in his food, or buying rickety houses hoping they'll collapse on him. But karma has a way of coming full circle, and Bonnie got a taste of her own medicine in the most humiliating way possible. During their daughter's birthday party, with friends and family gathered around, Bonnie overheard Joe having an affair with a colleague through the baby monitor. Imagine the mortification of discovering your spouse's betrayal while surrounded by people who are supposed to be celebrating your family. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the method of discovery was like something out of a soap opera nightmare. The fact that this happened during what should have been a joyous occasion for their child makes it even more devastating. Bonnie may be a serial cheater herself, but nobody deserves to have their private pain exposed in such a public and humiliating way. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the philosophical dog with more emotional baggage than a therapy convention. Poor Brian has endured countless injuries over the years, from losing his teeth in a fight with Peter to getting his face smashed by a fire hydrant. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was his temporary death in season 12. Getting hit by that car and actually dying, even if it was only for 2 episodes, represents the ultimate trauma for any character. Death is supposed to be permanent, final, the end of all stories. For Brian to experience that ultimate fear and then somehow return to life, the psychological impact must have been enormous. Think about it from his perspective. One moment he's crossing the street, the next he's presumably facing whatever comes after life. Then suddenly he's back, but with the knowledge that death is real, permanent, and can happen at any moment. That kind of existential trauma would mess with anyone's head, even a talking dog who writes pretentious novels. Bruce's story is one of love, acceptance, and heartbreaking loss. After years of hiding his true self, he finally came out, married his longtime partner Jeffrey, and even had a baby through surrogacy. For the first time in his life, Bruce was living authentically, openly, and happily. He had everything he'd ever wanted: a husband, a child, and the freedom to be himself without shame or fear. But Family Guy has never been kind to happiness, and during what should have been a perfect vacation in Bermuda, tragedy struck in the most brutal way imaginable. Jeffrey's hat fell into the water, and being the loving husband he was, he jumped in to retrieve it. That simple act of devotion cost him his life when a shark attacked and killed him in front of Bruce's horrified eyes. The imagery of watching Jeffrey get torn apart by a predator, followed by the soul-crushing sight of 2 coffins being loaded onto the plane, represents a level of trauma that goes beyond physical pain. Bruce had to watch his dreams of a perfect life literally get devoured before his eyes. Carter Pewterschmidt is arguably one of the most evil characters on the show. This billionaire has hidden cancer cures for profit, destroyed countless lives for money, and shown no remorse for any of his actions. But karma caught up with him in the most ironic way possible when Lois accidentally shot him in the head. The bullet caused severe brain damage that completely changed Carter's personality. Suddenly, this cruel capitalist became kind, generous, and caring. He wanted to give away all his money to charity and live a life of compassion instead of greed. For the first time ever, Carter was actually happy and at peace with himself. But Barbara couldn't stand the thought of losing their fortune, so she shot him in the head again, reversing the brain damage and bringing back the cruel version of her husband. The tragedy isn't just that Carter got shot twice by his own family. It's that he briefly experienced what it felt like to be a good person, only to have that stolen away from him. Chris Griffin's worst moment doesn't involve getting turned into sausage or any of the other bizarre things that happen to him regularly. No. His darkest hour came when the Griffin house caught fire and Herbert the creepy neighbor rushed in to supposedly save him. For a brief moment, it looked like Herbert might actually be a hero, but instead of carrying Chris to safety, he took him straight back to his own house. The most disturbing part wasn't even Herbert's actions. It was his family's complete lack of concern. When they discovered what happened, their reaction was basically that Herbert had earned the right to kidnap Chris. The casual acceptance of what was clearly an inappropriate situation shows just how little Chris's family actually cares about his well-being. Cleveland Brown has endured countless humiliations over the years, from his bathtub crashing through his house repeatedly to various other physical mishaps. But the absolute worst thing that happened to him was being betrayed by one of his closest friends in the most heinous way imaginable. Joe Swanson tricked Cleveland into going to what he thought was a vacation in Florida, but was actually a retirement home run by seniors who harvest organs from unsuspecting victims. Joe wanted Peter's legs for himself, but when that plan fell through, he sent Cleveland as a substitute without warning him about the danger. Imagine discovering that someone you trusted with your life had essentially sold you out to organ harvesters. Cleveland literally lost his legs because Joe was too selfish to give up his twisted scheme. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound because it came from someone he considered family. The mystery of Cleveland Jr. represents one of the show's darkest unsolved cases. The original Cleveland Jr. was energetic, slim, and full of life. But suddenly, without explanation, he was replaced by a completely different person who was overweight, slow, and bore no resemblance to the original character. The official explanation is that the original was replaced by a secret agent, but what actually happened to the real Cleveland Jr. remains unknown. The implications are terrifying. Is he dead? Is he being held captive somewhere? Has he been brainwashed? The uncertainty is almost worse than knowing the truth would be. This represents every parent's worst nightmare, having their child disappear and replaced by an imposter while everyone else pretends nothing happened. Cleveland doesn't even seem to notice or care that his son is completely different, which adds another layer of tragedy to the situation. Consuela works harder than anyone else in Quahog, fighting for her fellow maids while cleaning houses for multiple families and even Superman. But her dedication to helping others led her to work for James Woods, a decision she would come to regret in the most horrific way possible. In one of the show's darkest moments, Consuela revealed that Woods had assaulted her nephew, who later took his own life as a result of the trauma. This single line of dialogue carries more weight than entire episodes of physical comedy. It's a reminder that behind the jokes and gags, these characters have real pain and real trauma. The fact that Consuela continued working and fighting for others despite carrying this enormous burden speaks to her incredible strength. But nobody should have to endure such a devastating loss, especially when it could have been prevented. Death himself, the actual Grim Reaper, experienced his own form of mortality when he twisted his ankle while chasing Peter. Suddenly, the being responsible for all death on Earth was sidelined by a simple injury. Without Death able to do his job, chaos erupted as accidents piled up with no consequences. Being forced to hand over his powers to Peter Griffin, of all people, must have been absolutely humiliating for such a powerful entity. Imagine being rendered helpless by something as mundane as a twisted ankle when you're supposed to be one of the most feared forces in the universe. The irony of Death being unable to die from his own injury while watching Peter bungle the most important job in existence must have been torture. Sometimes the worst pain isn't physical. It's watching someone else destroy everything you've worked for. Diane Simmons's downfall began when she discovered she was being replaced by a younger news anchor. After dedicating her life to journalism, the industry she loved was throwing her away like yesterday's newspaper. The rejection and humiliation drove her to madness, leading to a killing spree at James Woods' mansion party. Her plan to frame Tom Tucker and reclaim her career was as desperate as it was violent. But when it all fell apart and she was about to kill Lois, Stewie ended her reign of terror with a single shot. Going from respected journalist to murderous villain to corpse in a matter of hours represents a complete life collapse that few characters have experienced. Dr. Hartman's medical incompetence is legendary, but the one time he actually did his job correctly, it ruined his career. During a routine prostate exam on Peter, he performed the procedure exactly as he was supposed to, but Peter's ignorance and embarrassment led to false assault charges that cost Hartman his medical license. The injustice of losing his livelihood for doing his job properly must have been devastating for someone who, despite his flaws, genuinely wants to help people. Being dragged through court and having his reputation destroyed over a misunderstanding shows how quickly a life can be ruined by ignorance and fear. When Peter later needed the same procedure and had to crawl back to the doctor he destroyed, the humiliation was complete. Hartman eventually got his license back, but the damage to his reputation and the trauma of the legal battle left permanent scars. Ernie the giant chicken has survived countless brutal fights with Peter over the years, but his battle with Meg might have been his last. When Meg moved in with her boyfriend's family and Ernie insulted Peter, she stood up for her father in the most violent way possible. Despite all the abuse Peter has heaped on her over the years, Meg's loyalty to her family ran deep enough that she couldn't stand hearing someone else trash-talk him. Her brutal decapitation of Ernie was both shocking and oddly touching, showing that family bonds can survive even the worst treatment. The sight of Ernie's headless body running around in front of his horrified family was disturbing, even by Family Guy standards. The fact that we didn't get the usual close-up of his eyes suggests this might have been his final defeat, making Meg the one person who could do what Peter never could. The evil monkey's story is actually quite sad when you think about it. For years he terrorized Chris by angrily pointing at him from the closet, but it turns out he was just too shy to start a conversation. All that time, he wasn't evil at all, just socially awkward and misunderstood. But before this revelation, the poor monkey was beaten up by Brian's son Dylan. Being attacked by someone when you're already struggling with social anxiety and communication issues must have been incredibly traumatic. The monkey was already isolated and afraid, and the violence only made things worse. Glenn Quagmire's entire identity revolves around his sexual prowess and his most prized anatomical feature. So when a shark bit off his manhood during a skiing trip, it represented the ultimate nightmare for someone whose whole personality is built around sexual conquest. Watching Quagmire become a shell of himself, miserable and lost without the one thing that defined him, was both comedic and genuinely sad. His entire sense of self-worth was tied to something that could be taken away in an instant, showing how fragile our identities really are. The solution, getting Ida's old equipment with a huge mole on it, was both generous and awkward. Having to explain to potential partners that you're using your father's former anatomy would be enough to give anyone performance anxiety for life. The greased-up deaf guy remained a mystery for years, slipping away from every attempt to catch him while spouting his signature catchphrase. But his origin story revealed a tragic accident that changed him from an ordinary businessman into the greasy enigma we know today. Getting caught in a grease truck explosion severe enough to cause deafness and require constant lubrication to survive sounds absolutely horrifying. Imagine going from a normal life to being a permanently slippery outcast who can't hear and can barely communicate with others. The transformation from respected professional to neighborhood oddity represents a complete loss of identity and social connection. He went from being someone people respected to someone they actively tried to avoid or capture. Herbert's backstory adds a dark historical element to his character. As a World War II pilot who was shot down and sent to a concentration camp, he experienced some of humanity's darkest hours. Being forced to do degrading work like sorting recyclables while imprisoned shows how war can strip away dignity and humanity. The fact that he describes the sticky trash as the worst part, while clearly downplaying much more serious trauma, suggests a coping mechanism of focusing on minor irritations to avoid confronting deeper pain. His current inappropriate behavior toward Chris might stem from the psychological damage of his wartime experiences. Ida's journey represents the struggle of living authentically while facing rejection from those you love most. When she came out as transgender to her son Quagmire, instead of receiving support, she was shunned and rejected. Being abandoned by your own child for being true to yourself is one of the cruelest forms of emotional pain. Even after Quagmire eventually accepted her, he later forced her to choose between him and her relationship with Brian. Making someone pick between their child and their chance at happiness is pure selfishness, especially after she had already made the generous gesture of giving him her former anatomy. Joe Swanson's transformation from paraplegic to quadriplegic during a bull run represents every disabled person's worst fear, losing even more independence and control over their life. Being paralyzed from the neck down instead of just the waist changed everything for him. The abandonment that followed was even worse than the physical trauma. His wife Bonnie immediately left him for Europe, claiming she didn't sign up for this level of care. His friends tried to help, but eventually dumped him in a terrible state facility when it became too much work. Being betrayed by both your spouse and your closest friends when you need them most is a special kind of hell. Joe eventually regained some function, but the emotional scars of abandonment would last forever. Jerome carries the heaviest emotional burden of any character on the show. Losing his wife to cancer just 1 week after their wedding, followed by his daughter's death from pneumonia 6 weeks later, represents a level of tragedy that transcends comedy. Even in a cartoon universe where death and destruction happen regularly, Jerome's story stands out as genuinely heartbreaking. The timing of these losses, coming right after what should have been the happiest moments of his life, makes the tragedy even more poignant. Jillian's happiness was shattered when Diane Simmons murdered her husband Derek during her killing spree. After being jerked around by Brian and finally finding a good man to marry, having that torn away by random violence must have been devastating. The look of absolute devastation on her face when she realized her husband was dead spoke volumes about the depth of her loss. Going from newlywed bliss to widow in a matter of moments represents the kind of trauma that changes someone forever. The Kool-Aid Man, despite being a corporate mascot, became a victim of Stewie's evil twin in one of the show's more surreal moments. Having your glass body smashed and your contents consumed by a psychotic baby represents a uniquely cartoonish form of murder. The fact that he returned later suggests some form of immortality, but the experience of being destroyed and consumed must have been traumatic even for a sentient beverage container. Lois Griffin has endured tremendous physical and emotional trauma over the years. While getting killed by Stewie in a simulation doesn't count as real, her other experiences are genuinely horrific. Getting boiling oil thrown on her by Peter left her with severe burns covering her entire body, but arguably worse was the mental trauma of watching Peter perform oral acts on her sick mother due to a hypnotherapy mishap. Physical burns heal, but that mental image would haunt her forever. The violation of boundaries and the grotesque nature of the incident make it worse than any physical injury. Loretta Brown's death was both tragic and disturbing. Falling to her death when Peter destroyed her house was bad enough, but Quagmire's necrophilic intentions afterward added another layer of horror to her fate. Being killed by your ex-husband's friend's stupidity and then having your corpse violated represents a complete denial of dignity, even in death. The fact that this was played for laughs makes it even more disturbing. Meg Griffin has endured so much abuse that choosing just one worst moment seems impossible. She's been shot, stabbed, humiliated, and ignored by her family for years. But losing her arms and legs while becoming deaf, dumb, and blind represents the ultimate disability nightmare. Being completely helpless and unable to communicate or care for yourself while still being conscious and aware would be torture beyond imagination. The combination of physical disability and sensory deprivation creates a prison worse than any jail cell. Mort Goldman's loss of his wife Muriel was made even more tragic by his inability to think of anything positive to say about their marriage. After decades together, being unable to recall a single happy memory suggests a relationship built on obligation rather than love. The fact that she died violently during Diane's killing spree adds sudden trauma to what might have otherwise been a natural parting. Having your spouse murdered while you're realizing your marriage was empty creates a complex grief that would be hard to process. Neil Goldman's humiliation when Meg kissed him during a crisis was compounded by his own poor judgment in broadcasting the moment publicly. Instead of treasuring a private moment, he turned it into a public spectacle that embarrassed them both. His subsequent suicide attempt showed how deeply the rejection affected him, but his actions had already ruined any chance he might have had with Meg. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are consequences of our own poor choices. Peter Griffin has caused enormous destruction throughout the series, but he's also been on the receiving end of significant trauma. Learning that his father figure wasn't his biological father created an identity crisis that shook his understanding of who he was. The existential pain of questioning your entire life story and family history cuts deeper than any physical injury. Peter's struggle to understand his place in the world after this revelation showed a vulnerability that's rare for his character. Seamus represents the ultimate survivor, having lost most of his body parts to various predators over the years. Whether it was James Woods, sharks, or other creatures, the systematic loss of limbs and organs while somehow remaining alive and conscious is a nightmare beyond comprehension. The fact that his origin story keeps changing suggests that the trauma was so severe he can't even remember it clearly. Living as mostly wood and prosthetics while maintaining consciousness would be a constant reminder of everything he's lost. Stewie Griffin has endured incredible trauma for a 1-year-old baby. From dingo attacks to being fused with his teddy bear, his young life has been filled with horror. But the worst incident was when he split his head open falling downstairs, and his family refused to get him medical attention. Instead of rushing him to the hospital, they tried to cover up the injury and hide the evidence. Watching a raccoon gnaw on his exposed brain, while his family worried more about getting in trouble than his health, shows a level of neglect that borders on criminal. The fact that he spent months in a coma while they continued to prioritize their own convenience over his life demonstrates how little they truly care about him despite their occasional shows of affection. Tom Tucker's identity crisis when he faced replacement by a younger anchor led to a complete career meltdown. Following Peter's advice to get tattoos live on air was the final nail in his professional coffin, destroying everything he'd worked for his entire life. Being fired from the job that defined him and then nearly committing suicide over the loss shows how completely his sense of self was tied to his career. The humiliation of having his replacement want to interview him before his suicide attempt added insult to injury. Trisha Takanawa's fate during the Y2K Apocalypse episode, becoming a victim of cannibalism, represents the ultimate objectification. Being reduced to literal food for other people strips away every aspect of humanity and dignity. Even in a post-apocalyptic setting, the casual way her consumption was discussed shows how completely society had broken down and how little value was placed on individual human life. Each of these characters has faced their own unique form of suffering, from physical trauma to emotional devastation to existential crisis. What makes these moments particularly impactful is how they contrast with the show's usual comedic tone. When Family Guy decides to get dark, it doesn't hold back. These aren't just random gags or throwaway jokes. They're genuine character moments that reveal the psychological depth hiding beneath the surface humor. The fact that these characters continue to function and interact normally after experiencing such trauma speaks to both human resilience and the show's commitment to treating serious subjects with the same casual attitude as everything else. Understanding these worst moments helps us appreciate the full scope of what these characters have endured. It's easy to laugh at their misfortunes when they're presented as comedy, but examining them seriously reveals a tapestry of human suffering that would challenge anyone's sanity. The genius of Family Guy lies in its ability to make us laugh at things that would horrify us in real life. By presenting extreme trauma in a comedic context, the show allows us to process difficult emotions and experiences in a safe environment. These characters serve as vessels for our own fears and anxieties, experiencing the worst possible outcomes so we don't have to. Their resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering provides a strange form of comfort and inspiration. Whether it's betrayal by loved ones, physical mutilation, loss of identity, or complete abandonment, every character has faced their ultimate nightmare and somehow survived to appear in the next episode. The cyclical nature of their suffering, where trauma is quickly forgotten and life returns to normal, reflects how we often deal with our own pain by compartmentalizing and moving forward rather than dwelling on past hurts. But tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can take comfort in knowing that no matter how bad your day was, at least you're not a Family Guy character. At least you don't have to worry about your house being destroyed by a giant chicken, your spouse cheating with your neighbor, or your family refusing to take you to the hospital when your brain is exposed. Sweet dreams, and remember that in the morning, you'll wake up in a world that's probably a little less chaotic than Quahog, Rhode Island. Though given the state of things these days, that might not be as comforting as it used to be. But hey, that's a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, just let the absurd suffering of animated characters lull you into peaceful slumber, secure in the knowledge that your problems are probably more manageable than theirs. Sleep tight, and don't let the evil monkeys point at you from the closet. Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated comedy? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wild world of Family Guy with facts so fascinating they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. From secret voice acting techniques to hidden Easter eggs that took fans decades to discover, these are the Family Guy facts that will blow your mind. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator named Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped office, sketching what would become one of television's most controversial and beloved families. Little did he know that his creation would survive cancellation twice, spark international debates, and become a cultural phenomenon that would define comedy for generations. But here's the thing. The story of Family Guy is far more incredible than anything Peter Griffin could ever dream up. Let's start with something that will immediately grab your attention. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox? The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Network executives thought the show was too edgy, too controversial, and frankly, too weird for mainstream television. They were wrong, dead wrong. The show's popularity on Adult Swim and DVD sales were so massive that Fox had no choice but to bring it back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007. But once again, fan outcry and incredible ratings forced the network to reverse their decision. This makes Family Guy one of the only shows in television history to be resurrected twice by pure fan power. Here's where things get really interesting. Seth MacFarlane, the creative genius behind the show, almost wasn't around to see his creation succeed. On September 11, 2001, MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11. Yes, that Flight 11. He was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but a combination of a hangover and his travel agent giving him the wrong departure time caused him to miss the flight by just 10 minutes. That flight crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. If not for that hangover and scheduling mix-up, there might never have been a Family Guy renaissance, no American Dad, no The Orville. The entire landscape of modern animation could have been completely different. Now, let's talk about voices, because this is where Family Guy becomes absolutely mind-blowing. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just create the show. He voices Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Stewie Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewter Schmidt. That's 6 major characters, each with completely distinct personalities and vocal patterns. But here's the kicker. He does all of these voices live, in real time, often switching between characters mid-sentence during recording sessions. The other voice actors have described watching MacFarlane work as like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder, except it's all controlled and brilliant. Speaking of Stewie, let's address the elephant in the room. For years, fans debated whether Stewie was gay, straight, or something else entirely. Seth MacFarlane finally settled this debate in a way that's both hilarious and profound. According to McFarlane, Stewie's sexuality is intentionally fluid and undefined because he's a baby. Babies don't have developed sexual identities. The joke isn't about his orientation. It's about the absurdity of a 1-year-old having any romantic inclinations at all. This clever writing choice allows the character to be whatever the story needs him to be, making him one of the most versatile characters in television comedy. Here's a fact that will make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single cutaway gag in Family Guy is hand-drawn and animated, even the ones that last only 3 seconds. The animation team creates full character models, backgrounds, and even choreography for jokes that might get a 2-second laugh. This dedication to craft is why Family Guy's visual comedy feels so rich and detailed compared to other animated shows that rely on cheaper animation shortcuts. The show's controversial reputation isn't accidental. It's carefully calculated. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that many of the most outrageous jokes are specifically designed to distract from the show's more subtle social commentary. While audiences are debating whether a particular gag went too far, they're absorbing deeper messages about American culture, politics, and society. It's comedy as intellectual sleight of hand, and it works brilliantly. Let's dive into some character origins that will surprise you. Brian Griffin, the intellectual family dog, was originally going to be just a regular pet with no speaking lines. MacFarlane added Brian's voice and personality during the pilot episode because he felt the family needed a voice of reason, someone who could call out Peter's ridiculous behavior while still being part of the family dynamic. The character became so integral that many episodes are built entirely around Brian's storylines. Here's something that might change how you watch the show forever. The Griffin family's house layout has been deliberately inconsistent throughout the series. Sometimes there are different numbers of rooms, staircases appear and disappear, and the kitchen changes size depending on what the scene requires. This isn't sloppy animation. It's an intentional choice. MacFarlane wanted the house to feel like a cartoon space where anything could happen, rather than a realistic location that would limit storytelling possibilities. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't originally supposed to become a recurring gag. The first chicken fight was written as a one-off joke for a single episode. However, the animation team had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they kept finding excuses to bring it back. These sequences now take weeks to animate and are some of the most expensive scenes the show produces, but they've become so beloved by fans that the network happily approves the budget every time. Let's talk about the show's relationship with censorship because it's more complex than you might think. Family Guy has actually been censored differently in various countries, creating unique versions of episodes around the world. In some regions, entire storylines are removed or altered. This has created a strange phenomenon where hardcore fans collect different international versions of episodes to see how the same jokes are handled in different cultural contexts. It's like a global experiment in comedy and censorship. Here's a technical fact that showcases the show's evolution. Early Family Guy episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, but the show gradually transitioned to digital animation. However, they maintained the hand-drawn look by using digital tools that mimic traditional animation methods. This hybrid approach gives Family Guy its distinctive visual style that looks both modern and classically animated. The writing process for Family Guy is unlike any other television show. The writer's room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional TV writing environment. Writers pitch jokes constantly, and the best ones get integrated into episodes regardless of whether they fit the main storyline. This is why the show's cutaway gags often feel so random and disconnected. They literally are random jokes that were too funny not to use. Speaking of cutaway gags, there's actually a complex system for categorizing them. The writers have developed an internal rating system for gags based on how offensive, surreal, or topical they are. This helps them balance episodes so that viewers get a mix of different comedy styles. Too many surreal gags in a row can lose audiences, while too many topical jokes can date an episode quickly. Here's something that will make you appreciate the voice acting even more. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, originally auditioned for a completely different character. She was supposed to voice a minor recurring character, But her chemistry with Seth MacFarlane during the audition was so strong that they rewrote Lois's personality to match Borstein's natural comedic instincts. This collaborative approach to character development is why the Griffin family feels so authentic despite being completely absurd. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture, political discourse, and even academic studies on contemporary humor. Universities now offer courses that analyze Family Guy episodes as examples of postmodern comedy and cultural commentary. The show that was once considered too lowbrow for television is now being studied by scholars as a significant cultural artifact. Let's explore the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that simply hire celebrities to play themselves, Family Guy often asks famous people to voice completely different characters. This approach has led to some surprising performances where you might not even recognize the celebrity's voice. The casting directors specifically look for celebrities who can disappear into their roles rather than just showing up to be famous. Here's a behind-the-scenes fact about the show's music. Every song in Family Guy, from the opening theme to the elaborate musical numbers, is composed and performed by professional musicians. Seth MacFarlane, who has released several jazz albums, personally oversees the musical aspects of the show. The orchestra recordings are done with full ensembles, giving the show's music a richness that most animated comedies can't match. The show's approach to social issues is more sophisticated than critics often acknowledge. Family Guy frequently tackles controversial topics, but the show's official stance is usually revealed through Brian's character, who serves as the moral compass. When Peter does something outrageous, Brian's reaction often represents the show's actual position on the issue. This allows the show to explore controversial territory while maintaining a clear ethical framework. Here's something that might surprise casual viewers. Family Guy has actually won several prestigious awards, including Emmy nominations and Annie Awards for animation excellence. The show's reputation for controversy sometimes overshadows its technical and artistic achievements, but industry professionals consistently recognize the quality of its writing, animation, and voice acting. The international success of Family Guy has led to some fascinating cultural adaptations. In some countries, local writers create original cutaway gags that reference local culture and politics while maintaining the show's overall style. These regional variations have become collector's items for international fans who want to see how different cultures interpret the Family Guy format. Let's discuss the show's relationship with its own continuity. Family Guy deliberately ignores its own timeline and character development, treating each episode as a standalone story. Characters die and come back to life. Major life events are forgotten, and personality traits change based on what's funny for individual episodes. This approach was revolutionary in television comedy and has influenced countless other shows. The animation style of Family Guy was specifically designed to be cost-effective while maintaining quality. The character designs use simple shapes and limited color palettes, which makes animation faster and cheaper. However, the show compensates for this simplicity with incredibly detailed backgrounds and elaborate action sequences. This balance between efficiency and spectacle is part of what makes the show economically sustainable. Here's a fact about the show's writing timeline that might surprise you. Family Guy episodes are often written months or even years before they air, which means the writers have to predict which topics will still be relevant by broadcast time. This has led to some episodes that feel incredibly timely and others that reference events or celebrities that are no longer culturally significant. The writers have learned to focus on timeless themes and universal human experiences that will remain funny regardless of when the episode airs. The show's approach to parody is methodical and research-intensive. When Family Guy decides to parody a movie, television show, or cultural phenomenon, the writers study the source material extensively. They watch movies multiple times, read reviews and analyses, and even interview people involved in the original productions. This thorough research is why Family Guy parodies often capture subtle details that casual viewers of the original material might miss. Speaking of parodies, let's talk about the show's relationship with other animated comedies. Family Guy exists in a strange competitive space with shows like The Simpsons and South Park. Rather than avoiding comparisons, the show has embraced them, creating episodes that directly reference and interact with these other shows. This meta approach to animated comedy has created a shared universe of sorts where different animated families acknowledge each other's existence. The voice recording process for Family Guy is surprisingly collaborative. While Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, the other actors often improvise and ad-lib during recording sessions. Many of the funniest moments in episodes come from spontaneous interactions between voice actors that weren't in the original script. The show's editors then work to integrate these improvised moments into the final episodes. Here's something that showcases the show's attention to detail. Family Guy maintains detailed character backstories and family histories that extend far beyond what's shown in episodes. The writers have created extensive biographies for each character, including childhood experiences, educational backgrounds, and psychological profiles. This hidden depth informs how characters react to different situations, even in seemingly random cutaway gags. The show's international broadcast has created some unique censorship challenges. Different countries have different standards for what can be shown on television, which means episodes are edited differently around the world. Some countries remove entire storylines, while others simply bleep out specific words or blur certain images. This has created a fascinating study in how different cultures approach comedy and censorship. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. The show's rapid-fire joke style and quotable dialogue have made it perfect for meme culture. Countless Family Guy moments have become viral internet content, often introducing the show to audiences who have never watched full episodes. This digital second life has helped maintain the show's cultural relevance across different generations. The animation team for Family Guy includes artists from around the world, creating a truly international production. Animators in different countries work on different aspects of each episode, with sophisticated coordination systems ensuring consistency across the global production pipeline. This international approach brings diverse artistic perspectives to the show while maintaining its distinctive American humor. Let's talk about the show's relationship with its own merchandise. Family Guy products range from traditional items like t-shirts and toys to unusual collaborations with high-end fashion brands and gourmet food companies. The show's irreverent attitude extends to its commercial partnerships, often resulting in products that are as surprising and unconventional as the show itself. The show's approach to holiday episodes demonstrates its sophisticated understanding of audience expectations. Rather than creating simple seasonal content, Family Guy holiday episodes often subvert traditional holiday tropes while still delivering the emotional satisfaction that viewers expect from seasonal television. This balance between cynicism and sentimentality is one of the show's most impressive achievements. Here's a final fact that brings everything full circle. Family Guy's survival and success represent more than just entertainment industry triumph. The show's journey from cancellation to cultural phenomenon demonstrates how modern media consumption has changed. In the pre-internet era, a canceled show stayed canceled. But Family Guy's resurrection through DVD sales, syndication, and streaming proved that audiences had more power than anyone realized. The show didn't just come back from the dead. It helped establish new models for how television shows can build and maintain audiences across multiple platforms and decades. As we wind down this journey through the fascinating world of Family Guy, remember that behind every outrageous joke and controversial moment is a team of artists, writers, and performers who have dedicated their careers to making people laugh. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has undeniably changed television comedy forever. From its near-death experiences to its current status as a cultural institution, the show proves that sometimes the most unlikely ideas become the most enduring successes. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, anything is possible, no matter how ridiculous it might seem.
Ever wondered what happens when you dive deep into the chaotic world of Quahog at 3 in the morning? Tonight we're exploring the most bizarre, hilarious, and downright weird facts about Family Guy that'll keep your mind occupied while you drift off to sleep. From hidden Easter eggs to behind-the-scenes secrets that even longtime fans don't know. This collection of random Family Guy trivia is perfect for those late-night moments when you need something entertaining but not too stimulating. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly you're wondering about the strangest details from America's most controversial animated family. Well, you're in luck, because we've gathered dozens of fascinating tidbits that reveal just how deep the rabbit hole goes in Seth MacFarlane's animated universe. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. Family Guy actually premiered in 1999, making it older than The Sopranos, Lost, and even The Office. But here's the kicker. The show was canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after 3 seasons, and then again in 2005 after being brought back for a 4th season. What saved it the second time? DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox had no choice but to bring it back permanently. Speaking of cancellations, did you know that the famous episode where Stewie and Brian get locked in a bank vault was actually written as a potential series finale? The writers thought the show might not get renewed, so they created this bottle episode as a way to give fans closure while keeping production costs low. It ended up becoming one of the most beloved episodes in the entire series. Here's something that'll make you appreciate the voice acting even more. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. But what's really impressive is that he can switch between all these voices seamlessly during recording sessions. The man is basically having conversations with himself for hours at a time. Imagine being in that recording booth and watching him argue with himself as Peter and Stewie. Now let's talk about some hidden details you've probably never noticed. In the opening credits, when the family is sitting on the couch, Stewie is always holding a different object. Sometimes it's a teddy bear, sometimes a ray gun, and occasionally it's something completely random, like a pineapple. The animators change this detail regularly, but it's so subtle that most viewers never pick up on it. The Griffin's address has actually been revealed multiple times throughout the series, but it keeps changing. Sometimes they live at 31 Spooner Street, other times it's 29 Spooner Street. This isn't continuity error. It's an intentional joke about how cartoon families can basically live anywhere the writers need them to live for the sake of a gag. Here's a weird one. Meg's full name is actually Megatron Griffin. This was revealed in one episode as a throwaway joke, but it's technically canon. Her parents named her after the Transformers villain, which honestly explains a lot about why she turned out the way she did. Imagine going through high school with that on your birth certificate. The chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken aren't just random acts of cartoon violence. They're actually parodies of classic action movie fight scenes. Each fight references different films, from They Live to The Matrix. The writers spend enormous amounts of time choreographing these sequences to match specific cinematic moments frame by frame. Speaking of references, Family Guy holds the unofficial record for most pop culture references in a single animated series. The writers keep a database of potential references organized by category, decade, and obscurity level. They literally have spreadsheets dedicated to tracking which celebrities they've already made fun of and which ones are still fair game. Here's something about Brian that might change how you see him. His character was originally supposed to be much more of a background character, like a regular family pet who occasionally made sarcastic comments. But Seth MacFarlane enjoyed voicing him so much that Brian evolved into basically being Seth's mouthpiece for political and social commentary. This is why Brian often sounds like he's giving a college lecture. He essentially is. The Conway Twitty cutaways aren't just random musical interludes. They serve a specific purpose in television production. When episodes run short, the writers can insert these musical segments to pad out the runtime without having to animate new scenes or write additional dialogue. It's brilliant efficiency disguised as absurdist humor. Cleveland's house has been destroyed and rebuilt more times than any other location in the series. The writers keep track of this, and it's actually become a running competition among the staff to see who can come up with the most creative ways to demolish Cleveland's property. His house is basically the Kenny McCormick of buildings. Here's a detail about Quagmire that most people miss. His house number is 29. Peter's is 31, and Cleveland's was 33 before he moved away. But Joe's house number has never been consistently established, which has led to fan theories that he doesn't actually own his house and is just perpetually house-sitting for someone else. The famous "Whose line is it anyway" reference, where Peter lists random words, isn't actually random. Each word was carefully chosen to represent a different category of Family Guy humor. They're basically a roadmap of the show's comedic philosophy, hidden in plain sight. Stewie's accent has gradually changed over the years, from a thick British aristocrat voice to something more American. This wasn't accidental. Seth MacFarlane has said that maintaining the original accent was physically exhausting, so he's slowly been relaxing it as the series progressed. If you go back and watch early episodes, the difference is striking. The Pawtucket Brewery where Peter works is actually based on a real brewery in Rhode Island. The exterior shots are rotoscoped from actual footage of the Narragansett Brewery, though the interior is completely fictional. Local Rhode Islanders often spot familiar landmarks in the background of various episodes. Here's something about the show's animation. The characters' eyes are deliberately drawn to be slightly different sizes. Peter's left eye is always drawn slightly larger than his right, which gives him that perpetually confused expression. This asymmetry was added specifically to make him look more dopey and lovable. The reason death appears so frequently in early seasons is because the writers were originally planning to kill off a main character in every season finale, but Fox executives weren't comfortable with the concept. So death became a recurring character instead of a plot device, which is actually much funnier in hindsight. Lois's maiden name is Pewterschmidt, but her middle name has been given as both Marie and Nicole in different episodes. The writers claim this is intentional, suggesting that Lois has been lying about her middle name for years for reasons that will never be explained. The evil monkey in Chris's closet was originally supposed to be revealed as Chris's imaginary friend, but the writers decided it was funnier if he was completely real and just randomly living in their house. This decision led to one of the series' most beloved recurring characters. Here's something about the show's timeline. The Griffins have been celebrating the same holidays for over 20 years of real time, but they never age. However, the writers occasionally drop hints about the passage of time through background details like changing technology and evolving fashion trends in crowd scenes. The reason Peter's boss, Mr. Weed, died in such a bizarre way, choking on dinner rolls while watching Popeye, was because the writers wanted to establish that anyone could die at any time in the Family Guy universe for completely ridiculous reasons. It set the precedent for the show's approach to mortality as comedy. Tricia Takanawa's reporting segments are all written by the same staff writer who used to work in local television news. All of her ridiculous news stories are based on real absurd stories that the writer covered during his journalism career, just exaggerated for comedic effect. The Drunken Clam Bar where Peter and his friends hang out was modeled after Cheers, but the writers deliberately made it seedier and more depressing to contrast with that show's warm, welcoming atmosphere. It's meant to represent the difference between idealized television friendships and actual dysfunctional male bonding. Here's a weird production detail. The show's writers keep a cutaway database with hundreds of unused cutaway gags organized by setup line. If they need a quick cutaway for an episode that's running short, they can search the database by keyword and find something appropriate. Some of these unused cutaways eventually become the basis for entire episodes. The reason Herbert, the elderly neighbor, is so creepy isn't just for shock value, is inexact. His character is actually a commentary on how society often ignores obvious warning signs about predatory behavior. The writers intentionally make him so obviously suspicious that it becomes absurd that no one in the show takes him seriously. Stewie's football-shaped head wasn't originally intentional. Seth MacFarlane was just a poor artist when he created the character. But the distinctive shape became so iconic that when the animation quality improved, they kept the weird proportions on purpose. The show's musical numbers aren't just random, they're specifically written to parody different Broadway and Hollywood musical styles. Each song is crafted to sound like it could come from a specific era of musical theater, from 1,930 seconds Hollywood musicals to modern Broadway productions. Here's something about the voice acting. When characters sing, their speaking voice actors don't always do the singing. Several characters have dedicated singing voices who are professional Broadway performers. This is why some characters sound noticeably different when they break into song. The chicken that fights Peter is named Ernie, and he has his own detailed backstory that's never fully explained in the show. According to the writers, Ernie has a family, a mortgage, and a completely normal life outside of his inexplicable rivalry with Peter. His motivations remain mysterious intentionally. Roadhouse is referenced more than any other single movie in Family Guy, appearing in over 30 different episodes in various forms. The writers have said this started as an inside joke because they couldn't believe how seriously the movie takes itself, but it evolved into genuine affection for the film's absurdity. The Conway Twitty segments were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of paying tribute to his grandfather, who was a huge country music fan. MacFarlane has said these moments are among his favorites in the entire series because they remind him of watching old variety shows with his grandfather. Meg's unpopularity isn't just a running gag. It's a deliberate commentary on how middle children often get overlooked in family dynamics. The writers have given her hidden depths that occasionally surface, suggesting she's actually the most emotionally intelligent member of the family despite being constantly ignored. The show's animation style deliberately mimics the look of 1,980 Saturday morning cartoons, complete with slightly off-model character designs and limited animation techniques. This was intentional, as MacFarlane wanted the show to feel nostalgic and slightly cheap, like the cartoons he grew up watching. Here's a detail about the opening theme. The lyrics were written to sound like a generic sitcom theme song, but they're actually describing a completely dysfunctional family situation. The cheerful melody masks the fact that the words are talking about how nothing in this family works properly. The reason Family Guy episodes often feel like collections of unrelated sketches is because that's exactly what they are. The writers start with a basic premise and then build around it with whatever random ideas they've been wanting to explore. This approach gives the show its unique, chaotic energy. So there you have it. Dozens of random Family Guy facts to occupy your mind as you drift off to sleep. From production secrets to hidden meanings, the world of Family Guy is far more complex and deliberate than it might appear on the surface. Whether you're a longtime fan or just discovering the show, these little details add extra layers to every rewatch. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably doing something spectacularly stupid, while Stewie plots world domination, and Brian writes terrible novels. The chaos never stops in the Griffin household, and honestly, we wouldn't want it any other way. Hey there, Night Owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some sleep but your brain is still buzzing, you've clicked on the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with some absolutely wild Family Guy facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you awake, pondering the bizarre genius of Seth MacFarlane's creation. Picture this scenario. You're lying in bed, eyes getting heavy, but your mind keeps wandering. Maybe you're thinking about that awkward conversation you had at work, or wondering why you ate that entire bag of chips for dinner. Well, forget all that mundane stuff because we're about to embark on a journey through 20 years of Family Guy madness that's guaranteed to give your brain something much more entertaining to chew on. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. When Seth MacFarlane first pitched Family Guy, he was just 24 years old and working at Hanna-Barbera. The network executives were so impressed with his 15-minute pilot that they ordered the series on the spot. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane had never actually run a television show before. He was essentially handed the keys to a multi-million-dollar production with zero experience as a showrunner. Talk about fake it till you make it. Speaking of MacFarlane, did you know he was supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th? He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but overslept after a night of drinking and missed the flight by just 10 minutes. When he arrived at the airport and learned what had happened, he realized how close he'd come to never creating the Griffin family we know and love today. It's one of those sliding door moments that makes you think about how different pop culture would be if he'd caught that flight. Now let's talk about Brian Griffin, the family's intellectual dog who walks on two legs and drives a Prius. Brian's character was actually inspired by MacFarlane's own dog, also named Brian, who passed away in the early 2000s. The real Brian was a white Labrador retriever, and MacFarlane has said that losing him was one of the most difficult experiences of his life. When the show temporarily killed off cartoon Brian in 2013, The fan backlash was so intense that McFarlane received death threats. People were legitimately angry about a fictional dog's death, which says something about how attached viewers had become to these animated characters. The temporary death of Brian actually serves as a perfect example of how deeply fans connect with Family Guy's characters, even though they're supposed to be parodies and caricatures. When Brian was hit by a car and replaced by a new dog named Vinny, voiced by Tony Sirico from The Sopranos, social media exploded with outrage. There were online petitions, angry tweets, and even real-world protests. The writers had planned to bring Brian back all along. It was meant to be a multi-episode arc exploring how the family would cope with loss, but the reaction was so overwhelmingly negative that they cut the storyline short and resurrected Brian after just 2 episodes. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to create, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode that just aired, the writers were working on the initial script almost a year ago. This long production timeline sometimes creates weird situations where the show references current events that are no longer current by the time the episode airs, or misses major cultural moments entirely because they couldn't pivot quickly enough. The cutaway gags that Family Guy is famous for were actually born out of necessity rather than creative choice. In the early seasons, episodes would often run short, and the writers needed quick ways to fill time. These random flashbacks and non-sequitur scenes were easy to animate and didn't require complex storytelling or character development. What started as a time-filling technique became the show's signature storytelling device, copied by countless other animated series. Let's dive into some character-specific weirdness. Stewie Griffin's distinctive football-shaped head wasn't originally intended to be football-shaped at all. McFarlane has said that Stewie's head design was meant to evoke a more oval, egg-like shape that would make him look unnatural and slightly alien. The football comparison only came up after the character was already established, and now it's impossible to unsee. Stewie's sexuality has been a topic of debate among fans for years, but McFarlane has given conflicting answers about whether the baby is gay, straight, or something else entirely. In some interviews, he suggested that Stewie is gay, while in others, he said the character is too young for sexual orientation to be relevant. The ambiguity seems to be intentional, allowing viewers to interpret the character however they want while keeping the writers free to take Stewie in any direction the story demands. Peter Griffin's voice is actually just Seth MacFarlane doing an impression of a security guard he knew growing up in Connecticut. The guard worked at the animation studio where MacFarlane interned during college, and he would do this exaggerated New England accent that MacFarlane found hilarious. Years later, when he needed a voice for Peter, he remembered that security guard and based the entire character's speech pattern on him. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated and fascinating. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are still certain words and topics that are completely off-limits for broadcast television. The writers have developed an entire arsenal of creative workarounds, using sound effects, cutaways, and strategic editing to suggest things they can't show explicitly. Sometimes the censored version is actually funnier than what they originally wrote because the restrictions force them to be more creative. Cleveland Brown's spin-off series, The Cleveland Show, was actually planned before Family Guy was even renewed for its 4th season. MacFarlane and the writers knew they wanted to explore Cleveland's character more deeply, but they weren't sure Family Guy would survive long enough to make it happen. When the show came back from cancellation stronger than ever, they were able to move forward with Cleveland's solo series, though it only lasted 4 seasons before Cleveland returned to Quahog. The character of Meg Griffin has gone through more voice actress changes than any other main character on the show. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg for the 1st season and part of the 2nd, but left due to scheduling conflicts with her film career. Mila Kunis took over the role and has been playing Meg ever since, but many fans still don't realize there was ever a different voice actress. Interestingly, Kunis was only 15 when she started voicing Meg, making her younger than the character she was playing. Family Guy's cancellation and resurrection story is one of the most unusual in television history. The show was canceled after just 3 seasons due to low ratings, but DVD sales and syndication reruns on Adult Swim introduced it to a whole new audience. The ratings for the reruns were actually higher than the ratings for new episodes had been when the show first aired. This success convinced Fox to bring the show back. making Family Guy the first canceled series to be revived purely based on DVD sales and cable reruns. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, though casual viewers might not notice the changes. Early episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, while current episodes are created entirely using digital animation software. The digital process allows for more complex visual effects and faster production times, but some longtime fans argue that the hand-drawn episodes had a warmer, more organic feel. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Despite Family Guy's reputation for random stream-of-consciousness humor, every single cutaway gag and non-sequitur moment is carefully planned and scripted. The writers spend weeks crafting these seemingly spontaneous moments, testing them with focus groups and refining them until they hit just the right note of absurdity. What feels effortlessly random is actually the result of meticulous preparation and timing. The character of Quagmire was originally going to be named Quahog, after the town where the Griffins live. But the writers realized that having a character and a location with the same name would be confusing for viewers, so they changed it to Quagmire at the last minute. The name Quagmire is actually a play on words, combining the idea of being stuck in a difficult situation with the character's, shall we say, adventurous romantic life. Death, the Grim Reaper character who occasionally appears on the show, was voiced by Norm Macdonald in his early appearances. Macdonald's deadpan delivery was perfect for the role, but scheduling conflicts meant he couldn't continue voicing the character regularly. Adam Carolla took over the role for several episodes before it eventually went to other voice actors. Death's inconsistent voice casting reflects one of the challenges of using celebrity guest stars for recurring characters. The show has featured some truly bizarre celebrity cameos over the years, but one of the strangest was Rush Limbaugh playing himself in an episode where Brian becomes conservative. Limbaugh recorded his lines during a commercial break of his radio show, and the writers had to work around his limited availability by keeping his dialogue minimal and straightforward. The episode aired during the height of Limbaugh's popularity, and his appearance generated significant media attention. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which allows the writers tremendous creative freedom, but sometimes confuses viewers who are paying close attention. Characters die and come back to life. Major events happen and are never mentioned again. And the timeline of the show makes absolutely no sense if you try to analyze it logically. This isn't accidental. The writers have explicitly said they prioritize individual episode quality over long-term story coherence. The show's merchandising success has been almost as impressive as its television ratings. Family Guy merchandise has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, with everything from t-shirts and coffee mugs to video games and board games. The talking plush toys of Stewie and Brian were particularly popular, though they had to be carefully programmed to avoid saying anything too inappropriate for younger children who might play with them. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how they handle controversial episodes. The writers have an informal rating system for how potentially offensive each episode might be, and they adjust the marketing and promotion accordingly. Episodes that push boundaries harder than usual often air with less advanced publicity, allowing them to reach audiences without generating pre-broadcast controversy that might lead to censorship. The show's relationship with Fox Network executives has been notoriously rocky over the years. MacFarlane has been vocal about his frustrations with network interference, and several episodes have included not-so-subtle jabs at Fox's programming decisions and corporate culture. Despite this tension, Family Guy remains one of Fox's most valuable properties, giving MacFarlane significant leverage in creative disputes. Here's a production detail that most viewers never think about, but affects every single episode. The timing of animated comedy is completely different from live-action comedy because animated characters can move and react in ways that real actors cannot. Jokes that would fall flat in live action can work perfectly in animation because the visual possibilities are unlimited. The writers and animators work closely together to ensure that the timing of visual gags matches the rhythm of the dialogue. The voice recording process for Family Guy is also unique in the animation world. Most animated shows record each actor separately, but Family Guy often brings the main cast together for group recording sessions. This allows for more natural interactions and improvisation, though it also makes the recording process more expensive and time-consuming. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, So he sometimes has to have conversations with himself, switching between Peter, Brian, and Stewie within the same scene. As you're drifting off to sleep tonight, think about this final fact. Family Guy has now been on the air for over 2 decades, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. Kids who watched the first episode when it premiered in 1999 are now adults with children of their own. The show has outlasted multiple generations of network executives, survived cancellation, and adapted to completely different media landscapes, from broadcast television to streaming services. The Griffin family has become as familiar to many people as their own relatives, which is both impressive and slightly disturbing when you consider how dysfunctional that family actually is. But maybe that's the secret to Family Guy's enduring appeal. In a world where real families can be just as complicated and bizarre as the fictional ones we see on television, there's something comforting about knowing that no matter how weird your own family dynamics might be, at least you're not dealing with a talking baby who's constantly plotting world domination, and a dog who's writing the great American novel. Sweet dreams, and remember, life's a lot like Family Guy. Sometimes it makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's completely random, and sometimes you just have to go with it and hope for the best. Whether you're a longtime fan or a newcomer to the show, these facts give you a glimpse into the creative chaos that makes Family Guy such a unique entry in television history. Sleep well, and maybe you'll dream about Quahog tonight. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics! If you're settling in for some bedtime content about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving deep into the Griffin household with some fascinating facts that'll either help you drift off peacefully or keep you up thinking about just how wild this show really gets. Now, before we jump into our relaxing journey through Quahog, let me ask you something. Have you ever really stopped to think about how Family Guy has been part of our lives for over 2 decades? Since 1999, this show has given us countless laughs, memorable cutaway gags, and characters that have become household names. But tonight, we're going beyond the surface-level humor to explore some truly mind-blowing details you probably never knew. Here's something that might surprise you right off the bat. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. The network executives thought the show wasn't finding its audience. But here's where it gets interesting. Adult Swim picked up the reruns, and the show exploded in popularity. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. They brought it back in 2005, and it's been running ever since. Sometimes, the best things in life really do come back when you least expect them. Let's talk about the voice behind Stewie Griffin for a moment. Seth MacFarlane, the show's creator, originally based Stewie's voice on a combination of Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady and a generic posh English accent. But here's the fascinating part. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's sexuality has always been deliberately ambiguous. The character exists in this interesting space where his romantic interests shift depending on what serves the story best. It's actually a clever writing technique that keeps the character unpredictable and allows for more diverse storylines. Speaking of voices, did you know that Seth MacFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewterschmidt? That's 6 major characters, all coming from one incredibly talented vocal performer. When you think about it, MacFarlane is essentially having conversations with himself in most scenes. The man has to switch between these distinct personalities, sometimes within the same sentence. It's like being a one-person theater troupe. Here's a production fact that'll blow your mind. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial concept to final product. The animation process alone requires hundreds of individual artists working on different aspects. Every single movement, facial expression, and background detail has to be hand-drawn and then digitally colored. When you consider that the show produces over 20 episodes per season, you start to realize the incredible amount of work that goes into bringing the Griffin family to life. The show's famous cutaway gags weren't actually planned from the beginning. They evolved naturally as the writers found themselves wanting to include jokes that didn't fit into the main storyline. These random flashbacks and fantasy sequences became such a signature element that other animated shows have tried to copy the format, but none have quite captured the same spontaneous energy that Family Guy brings to these moments. Now, let's explore some character development that might help you see the show in a new light. Brian Griffin, the family dog, was originally going to be much more of a background character. McFarlane has said that Brian evolved into the show's voice of reason almost by accident. The writers kept finding themselves using Brian as a way to comment on Peter's more outrageous behavior, and gradually he became this intellectual counterpoint to the family's chaos. It's interesting how a character can grow beyond their original intended purpose. Here's something about the show's cultural impact that's worth pondering as you drift off tonight. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and broadcasts in over 100 countries worldwide. But the cultural references and American humor don't always translate perfectly. International versions sometimes have to completely rewrite jokes or replace cultural references with local equivalents. Imagine trying to explain a 1,980 seconds American pop culture reference to someone in rural Japan. The localization teams for this show deserve serious recognition. The relationship dynamics within the Griffin family actually reflect a lot of real family psychology, despite all the absurd situations they find themselves in. Take the sibling rivalry between Chris and Meg, for example. While it's exaggerated for comedic effect, it captures something genuine about how teenagers navigate their place within family hierarchies. Even the marriage between Lois and Peter, with all its dysfunction, touches on real issues that many couples face, just amplified to ridiculous proportions. One aspect of the show that's evolved significantly over the years is its approach to social commentary. Early seasons focused more on pure absurdist humor, but as the series progressed, it began tackling more complex social and political issues. The writers found ways to embed serious conversations about topics like religion, politics, and social justice within the framework of outrageous comedy. It's like sneaking vegetables into a kid's favorite dessert. The animation style of Family Guy has also undergone subtle but significant changes over the decades. If you compare early episodes to recent ones, you'll notice the color palette has become richer, the character movements more fluid, and the background details more elaborate. Technology has allowed the animators to add layers of visual storytelling that weren't possible in the better show's early days. Yet they've managed to maintain the core visual identity that makes Family Guy instantly recognizable. Let's talk about the show's relationship with music for a moment. Family Guy has featured hundreds of musical numbers over the years, from elaborate production numbers to simple character songs. Seth MacFarlane's background in musical theater heavily influences these sequences. Many of the songs are surprisingly well crafted from a musical standpoint, with proper verse-chorus structures and sophisticated orchestrations. Some episodes are essentially animated musicals disguised as sitcom episodes. Here's a fascinating detail about the show's writing process. The writer's room operates on a principle they call yes and, borrowed from improvisational comedy. When someone pitches an idea, no matter how outrageous, the group tries to build on it rather than shut it down immediately. This approach has led to some of the show's most memorable and bizarre moments. It's a reminder that creativity often flourishes when we suspend our initial judgment and let ideas develop naturally. The character of Meg Griffin represents something unique in television comedy. She's simultaneously the most normal member of her family and the one who receives the most abuse from everyone around her. This creates an interesting dynamic where the audience often sympathizes with her while still laughing at her misfortunes. It's a delicate balance that the writers have maintained for over 20 years, and it speaks to something deeper about how we treat people who don't fit into expected social roles. Cleveland Brown's departure to his own spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy created some interesting continuity challenges for the writers. They had to explain his absence and return in ways that felt natural to the ongoing story, while also acknowledging the real-world production reasons behind these changes. It's a perfect example of how television shows must constantly adapt to behind-the-scenes realities while maintaining narrative consistency. The show's approach to time and continuity is intentionally flexible. Characters age slowly or not at all, major events from one episode might never be mentioned again, and the family's financial situation fluctuates wildly depending on story needs. This loose approach to continuity allows for maximum creative freedom, but also creates opportunities for dedicated fans to spot inconsistencies and create theories about the show's internal logic. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. Countless memes, viral videos, and social media trends have originated from or been inspired by the show. The phrase, "Oh no, he didn't," might never have become a cultural touchstone without Peter Griffin's dramatic delivery. The show's rapid-fire humor style has influenced how people create and consume comedy content online. The voice acting in Family Guy extends far beyond the main cast. Over the years, the show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest voices, from major Hollywood stars to political figures to fellow comedians. Some guests play themselves, others take on original characters, and a few have become recurring voices in the Family Guy universe. The casting directors have an impressive ability to match celebrity voices with characters that enhance rather than distract from the story. Here's something that might help you appreciate the show's craft as you wind down for the night. The timing of Family Guy's comedy is incredibly precise. Voice actors don't just deliver lines. They perform them with specific rhythms and pauses that maximize comedic impact. The editors then fine-tune these performances, sometimes adjusting timing by fractions of seconds to hit the perfect comedic beat. It's a level of precision that most viewers never consciously notice but definitely feel. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved significantly since its early days. Standards and practices for television have changed, allowing Family Guy to push boundaries that would have been impossible in its first seasons. At the same time, the writers have developed more sophisticated ways to be provocative without simply relying on shock value. It's an interesting case study in how creative people adapt to changing cultural standards while maintaining their artistic voice. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, consider how the show has managed to remain relevant across multiple generations of viewers. People who watched the show as teenagers in the early 2000s are now watching it with their own children. The humor that resonates with different age groups varies, but there's something universal about the Griffin family's chaotic energy that transcends generational boundaries. The production team behind Family Guy has created what amounts to a small animation empire. The success of the main show led to spin-offs, specials, video games, merchandise, and even live concert tours featuring the show's music. From a business perspective, Family Guy demonstrates how a creative property can expand far beyond its original medium while maintaining its core identity. Finally, as you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something special in the landscape of American entertainment. It's a show that dares to be completely ridiculous while occasionally touching on profound truths about family, society, and human nature. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who just discovered the show, there's something comforting about knowing that somewhere in the fictional town of Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into some new absurd adventure. The next time you watch Family Guy, you might find yourself noticing details you never saw before, appreciating the craft behind the chaos, or simply enjoying the comfort of familiar characters doing wonderfully unpredictable things. Sometimes the best. Entertainment doesn't try to change your life. It just makes the everyday world a little more interesting and a lot more fun. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow's another day in Quahog, and there's always another ridiculous adventure waiting just around the corner. Whether you're Team Peter, Team Brian, or even Team Meg, the Griffin family will be there whenever you need a laugh or just want to escape into a world where anything can happen, and usually does. Picture this. You're settling in for a cozy night, getting ready to drift off into dreamland, but instead of counting sheep, how about we count some truly wild facts about one of television's most unpredictable animated families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy, and trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll have enough random trivia rattling around in your brain to either help you fall asleep or keep you up all night wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind works. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's origins. Family Guy almost never existed in the form we know today. Back in the late 90s, Seth MacFarlane was working at Hanna-Barbera, the legendary animation studio behind classics like The Flintstones and The Jetsons. He created a short film called The Life of Larry for his thesis project at the Rhode Island School of Design, which featured many of the characters who would eventually become the Griffin family. The short was so impressive that it caught the attention of Fox executives, but here's where it gets interesting. MacFarlane was only 24 years old when he pitched the show, making him one of the youngest creators in television history to get a primetime animated series greenlit. The original concept was quite different from what we see today. Peter Griffin was initially going to be much more of a traditional sitcom dad. Think more like Homer Simpson, but without the yellow skin. The character's personality evolved significantly during the development process, becoming the lovably obnoxious and often controversial figure we know now. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that he drew inspiration from his own father's mannerisms and speech patterns, particularly the distinctive Rhode Island accent that Peter sports throughout the series. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's complexity a bit more surface. The average Family Guy episode contains over 300 individual drawings. Each 22-minute episode requires thousands of hours of work from dozens of artists, animators, and voice actors. The animation process alone takes approximately 8 months from initial script to final product, which explains why the show's production schedule is so carefully planned out years in advance. Speaking of voice acting, Seth MacFarlane performs the voices of 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. But here's something that might blow your mind. He records all of their dialogue separately, often having conversations with himself that last for hours. MacFarlane has described the experience as somewhat surreal, especially when he's voicing emotional scenes between characters like Brian and Stewie, who have some of the most complex relationships on the show. The character of Stewie Griffin deserves special attention because his development represents one of the most dramatic character evolution arcs in animated television history. Originally conceived as a straightforward villain baby bent on world domination and matricide, Stewie gradually transformed into a more nuanced character, exploring themes of sexuality, intelligence, and family dynamics. The shift was so gradual that many viewers didn't notice it happening over the course of several seasons. MacFarlane has stated that this evolution was intentional, reflecting his own growth as a writer and his desire to explore more sophisticated storytelling within the animated comedy format. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production involves their approach to cutaway gags, those random tangential moments that have become the show's signature. The writers maintain what they call a gag bank, which is essentially a massive database of potential cutaway ideas that they can draw from when constructing episodes. Some of these gags were written years before they actually appeared on screen, waiting for the right episode and context to make them work. The process of selecting which gags make it into episodes involves multiple rounds of testing and refinement, with the writers constantly evaluating whether a particular joke will land with audiences or fall flat. The show's relationship with controversy has been both a blessing and a curse throughout its run. Family Guy has been canceled twice by Fox, first in 2002 after 3 seasons, and then brought back in 2005 due to strong DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The second cancellation never actually happened, but the show came close several times due to various controversies and ratings fluctuations. What's interesting is that many of the episodes that generated the most controversy also ended up being some of the most popular, suggesting that the show's willingness to push boundaries is intrinsically linked to its success. The voice acting ensemble deserves recognition for their incredible consistency and chemistry. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, actually auditioned for the role while she was performing in the sketch comedy group MAD-TV. Her distinctive voice for Lois was inspired by her own grandmother, and she's mentioned that she sometimes forgets she's not using her natural speaking voice when recording Lois scenes. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, was only 14 years old when she started on the show, making her one of the youngest voice actors to land a major role in prime-time animation. The show's musical elements often go unnoticed, but they represent a significant portion of the production effort. Family Guy features more original music than most animated series, with MacFarlane himself composing many of the songs and musical numbers. His background in musical theater strongly influences these segments, and many episodes feature elaborate musical sequences that require additional voice actors, musicians, and extended animation sequences. The episode Road to the Multiverse alone featured over 40 different animation styles and required nearly double the typical production time. Here's something that might surprise fans of the show's seemingly random humor. Family Guy episodes are actually meticulously structured according to classical comedy writing principles. Each episode follows a 3-act structure with carefully planned pacing and timing. The cutaway gags aren't randomly inserted. They're strategically placed to provide relief from main plot tension or to enhance particular jokes. The writers spend considerable time in the editing process, adjusting the timing of these elements to maximize comedic impact. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has spawned countless internet memes, influenced other animated series, and even affected the way people communicate online. Phrases like, "Oh my God, who the hell cares?" and "What the deuce?" have entered common usage, and the show's irreverent style has influenced everything from advertising to political commentary. The series has also been credited with helping to revive interest in animated comedy among adult audiences, paving the way for shows like Rick and Morty and BoJack Horseman. One of the most technically impressive aspects of Family Guy involves their approach to celebrity impressions and guest voices. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity guest stars over the years, but what's remarkable is how they integrate these appearances into the show's established comic rhythm. Many celebrities have mentioned that recording for Family Guy requires a different approach than traditional voice acting because the timing and delivery style is so specific to the show's aesthetic. The international versions of Family Guy present fascinating variations on the original concept. In different countries, certain cultural references are modified or replaced entirely to make sense to local audiences. The German version, for example, includes completely different cutaway gags that reference German culture and history. These adaptations require not just translation but complete rewriting of significant portions of episodes, essentially creating parallel versions of the same show. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional television writing environment. Writers regularly perform their ideas for each other, and the collaborative process involves a lot of improvisation and spontaneous joke development. McFarlane has described the experience as one of the most creatively fulfilling aspects of producing the show, and many writers who have worked on Family Guy have gone on to create their own successful comedy series. The show's approach to social commentary often flies under the radar because it's wrapped in such outrageous humor. Many episodes tackle serious subjects like politics, religion, and social justice, but they do so through such an absurdist lens that the commentary becomes almost subliminal. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics while maintaining its primarily comedic focus, though it also means that viewers can interpret the show's messages in wildly different ways. Family Guy's influence on animation technology shouldn't be overlooked either. The show was among the first animated series to extensively use digital animation techniques, and their production pipeline has been studied and emulated by animation studios worldwide. The efficiency of their animation process allows them to produce episodes more quickly than many competing shows, which is part of why they've been able to maintain such a consistent release schedule for so many years. The merchandising empire surrounding Family Guy represents another fascinating aspect of the show's cultural impact. From action figures to clothing lines to video games, the show has spawned a massive array of consumer products. What's interesting is how these products often feature jokes and dusgly references that only hardcore fans would understand, creating multiple tiers of engagement with the show's content. The show's relationship with censorship provides insight into how television content standards have evolved over the past 2 decades. Early episodes of Family Guy pushed boundaries that were considered quite shocking at the time, but many of those same jokes would barely register as controversial today. The series has served as a kind of barometer for changing social attitudes about humor, language, and acceptable content on television. Looking at Family Guy's longevity, it's remarkable that a show built around such seemingly random humor has maintained relevance for over 2 decades. Part of this success stems from the flexibility of the format, in the end, because the show isn't tied to realistic character development or consistent continuity. It can adapt to changing cultural contexts much more easily than traditional sitcoms. Characters can be completely different from episode to episode without breaking the show's internal logic. The voice recording process for Family Guy involves some unique challenges that most animated shows don't face. Because so many characters are voiced by the same actors, recording sessions often require complex scheduling to allow for quick character switches. McFarlane, in particular, has developed techniques for rapidly shifting between his different character voices, sometimes switching between Peter and Brian mid-sentence during recording sessions. Family Guy's impact on comedy writing extends beyond animation into live-action television and film. Many comedy writers cite the show's fearless approach to offensive humor and its willingness to commit fully to absurd premises as influential in their own work. The show's success proved that audiences were hungry for comedy that didn't follow traditional rules about likability or moral messaging. The technical aspects of producing Family Guy's signature visual style involve more complexity than might be immediately apparent. The seemingly simple character designs actually require precise consistency across hundreds of artists working on each episode. The show maintains detailed style guides that specify everything from the exact curve of Peter's chin to the precise shade of Brian's fur, ensuring visual continuity across different animation teams and production facilities. As we wind down this journey through the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, it's worth noting that the show continues to evolve and surprise audiences after more than 20 years on the air. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying that Family Guy has carved out a unique place in television history, pushing boundaries and challenging expectations in ways that few shows ever attempt. So, there you have it, a deep dive into the bizarre, brilliant, and sometimes bewildering universe of Family Guy. From its humble beginnings as a college thesis project to its status as one of the longest-running animated series in television history, the show represents a fascinating case study in how unconventional creativity can find mainstream success. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, literally anything can happen, and usually does.